What we have on our hands, y'all, is a global phenomenon, and you're a part of it. So, hey everyone, welcome to Joffrey the Giant. I'm Joffrey Swait. If you are into hearing me talk about what I'm into, then join the Discord. That's where the conversation continues when I'm offline. Well, not posting videos, that is. Great stuff happening over there. Come on in, the water's fine. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Okay, so I said we're talking about a global phenomenon. And I'm talking on various levels, because you know what? The gospel of Jesus Christ will cover the earth. If that ain't a global phenomenon, I don't know what is. Phenomena. Do. What's going on for the gospel in Moscow, Idaho is phenomenal. It is a phenomenon, and it has reach. And I want to talk in this video about what that means for you and for me, Joe Schmuck and Janet Schmuckina in Moscow, Idaho. Just some average Joes being Christians and worshiping in Moscow, Idaho. What does it mean for us? What are we doing? So, Wilkie, an assistant pastor of mine, he has the best mustache at Christ Church. He gave an exhortation a few weeks back talking about, the inner ring, right, and how it's a temptation he talked about C.S. Lewis's conversation on these themes, and then he went into it himself. And this temptation to sort of look, always want to be in the inner circle. And as soon as you get to the inner circle of a certain community, you start looking further in and realizing, there's another inner circle where these are the people who actually are the ones who matter and actually the ones who make the decisions. And I want to be one of those people. That's what's going to validate me. Right, and so he just exhorted the people of our church to ignore that. And you know what? That's particularly piquant. It's particularly relevant and spicy for us because there's no way around it. And shoot, some of my pastors might not like me putting it this way, but there's some celebrity action going on, right? That's just a fact. There's a little dose of royalty that goes on in the Moscow Christian community that is not cultivated by the luminaries, but because there are a lot of people who focus on them as luminaries, that can sort of happen. And it is something to be mortified. But that's a reality that our pastors have to deal with. So there's Wilkie telling us not to do it. Don't focus on the inner ring. Don't focus on the endless discontent, because you never arrive. Focus instead on living your life simply, humbly, worshipfully. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God, and let the chips fall where they may. And so this video is actually not about all this stuff I've been talking about. I'm actually going to kind of flip it a little bit. But I'll just sort of add that, man, there's great contentment in just making a couple of friends on your block. And that's, leaving it at that. When we look at Moscow, pretty much every block has got Christians on it, and has got, when you're talking about Christ Church and all the people moving here, it's got Kirkers in it, on it. So the reason I want to flip it is because of some just wonderful experiences I've had here in Brazil. I'm in Brazil right now. That actually reminded me of some things that I saw in Tennessee and South Dakota with some of the Fight, Laugh, Feast stuff. And how that should impact how we, you and I, Joe and Janet Schmuckina, yeah, maybe you can't tell. What I'm saying is schmuck, but I'm making it feminine. Schmuckina. Anywho, we're just average folks. How does this impact our lives? All right, so I talked about these inner circles, right? And focusing on the inner circles, which don't exist, and it gets super weird, and you get all discontent. Well, let's push these rings out instead of in. The circles out instead of in. The community in Moscow has a global impact on the church. And I don't just mean that Pastor Wilson, Doug Wilson, might post something on Facebook and then someone in Russia might like it. That's not what I mean. I mean something significant. I mean that thousands and thousands of people are being impacted for the gospel by what happens in Moscow, and you are a part of that. And that's what I want to talk about. So instead of having the circles go in, let's have the circles go out. Okay, so at the Fight Left East conferences, I heard so much. People in the CREC a little bit, people outside the CREC mostly. Oh, my church closed, and we had to wear masks or whatever it was, and then went to this other church. And I saw a CREC church recently post a picture of Fauci as the patron saint of church growth, and that's absolutely what happened, because the churches that stayed open, stayed faithful, they grew. Praise God. But people in crisis, right, dealing with all of this that has rolled downhill at us, and it's persecution. We don't need to mince words. There's been persecution against Christians, and a lot of Christians have been complicit in it in the United States and around the world. So seeing what was happening in Moscow was a beacon. It served as a beacon. We have to realize this is a community thing. We have pastors, we have leaders, we have leading thinkers, we have leading callers to action, we have leading businessmen, just as it happens in any community. We have leading restaurateurs. It's just a big community. And there are leaders and leading lights in this community. But it's not just about the leading lights. Sean Bonnet, I love you. I mean, average dudes, music teachers, got arrested and retweeted by Trump. All right, so there's that. So here I am in the capital of Brazil. I'm in Brasilia right now. I am Brazilian, in case you didn't know. And one of my friends here is the owner of, I think, the most significant Reformed publishing house in Brazil. There are two or three. The biggest one is actually Reformed Baptist. So this is this crew. They're Presbyterian. They publish a lot of different things. It's certainly the one that publishes the things with the most weight. And they've actually published the most stuff from Canon that's been published in the States. There are a bunch of Doug Wilson books, a bunch of Lightheart books, there's some Lusk books, stuff from Athanasius Press, which I absolutely love. They publish Brazilians, and there are all these French authors that they've gotten in here as well. I mean, it's just a great publishing house. So on day one, I get here to Brasilia, I go to the publishing house, I'm hanging out with my friend, and in comes a pastor I know with a couple of other guys. And one of them is like a leading Christian musician here in Brazil. And the pastor, as soon as he sees me, he's like, "Oh, Joffrey, I didn't expect to see you here." Maybe I made a happier face than he actually made. But anyway, he's like, "Oh, Joffrey, I didn't expect to see you here." Yeah, here I am. I'm visiting Felipe. Great. And then he had just seen Wilson's video about fake vaccination IDs. And so he started joking about that. Well, lo and behold, it wasn't a joke for one of the guys that was with him. And I mean, I don't mean to suggest that the pastor was being flippant, but joking around. So first of all, note that a Brazilian pastor who pastors a significant congregation with lots of, I mean, this is the capital of Brazil. There are some powerful people in this city. Just took note of what Wilson had said, and the conversations had been had. Fruitful conversations, I think. And lo and behold, this other guy in the group told a story of how he had been, out west in Brazil, not in anywhere in an important city, and was talking to someone about that same video, and the pastor of the church overheard. And they started talking about, well, the pastor asked, would you know how to get, one of these solutions? And, well, yeah, you know what? I know a guy. Well, great, this pastor way out wherever says, our congregation's really concerned about this, and our church is going to want that. Now, whoever would have thought that, the video that you're watching, that's a bit of pastoral instruction. And yeah, you know what? I mean, it's aimed at more than just us in Moscow. It is, it's aimed nationally, but it has this huge untold impact. I mean, think about that. Think about the fact that there's a church in a remoter part of Brazil that is going to be resisting in their own small way government tyranny because of a conversation that was had because of some pastor in Idaho whose church isn't even that big. I mean, it's a big church for you and me, but that's crazy. That's God's providence. Tell one more little thing, and then I'm going to make my point. A couple of days after that, I'm hanging out with my buddy again, the publisher, and this other pastor comes to visit in his house. He wants to talk about postmillennial theology. So we're there, we're chatting, talking postmillennialism, and me saying, I don't even like to use the term. I don't like to use the millennial paradigms that are a response to premillennialism, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to get into it. We're talking about optimistic eschatology. We're talking James Jordan. It's just getting fun times late into the evening. And at some point in the conversation, I mentioned a certain book title, or Felipe mentioned a certain book title, and lo and behold, somehow Wilkie's name comes up. Remember that pastor I mentioned with the mustache? Well, he got an email. And just by the fact that happened, I suddenly realized. So he got an email from this pastor who was hanging out with us in Brazil, talking about postmillennialism. He had, weeks and weeks before, emailed with a question. And Wilkie had responded saying, emailed the church, our church, y'all. Christ Church. And Wilkie had responded saying, I'm one of the assistant pastors. Here are some books you can read, some resources you can get into. And I took a picture of the two of us and sent it to Wilkie saying, you're having an impact for Christ all over the world. But a couple of things that I realized in hearing this. My church gets emails from everywhere. I mean, if it happened from some Brazilian pastor, and they must be getting stuff from elsewhere. I hadn't even thought about that. That there are people who are hungry enough for resources and reading and instruction and a little guidance that they email our church. Yeah, I'm sure we're not the only one, but and it must be in more than just Brazil. And Wilkie's email, I mean, this is not me throwing him under the bus. This is just me observing the phenomenon of it. It was, pretty straightforward. It was just, well, here are the resources, because, Wilkie's got work to do. and our church has work to do. So we can be helpful, but we've also got like stuff we've got to do. I mean, it just blows my mind. All right, so why am I telling you guys all of this? Because our church and our Christian community has an enormous impact, and God is to be praised for that. And I think we ought to be animated by that, excited by that, motivated by that. Motivated to do what? Animated to do what? To live our Christian lives simply, in community, to have our community grow, but grow outward. This is my encouragement to you, not to look inward, not to look into like, well, okay, our church could be better in this or that. I mean, that's not quite obnoxious, but our church sucks at this or that, or I wish I were part of that circle, or I wish our church were more like X or like Y. I mean, I have such wishes, but I pray that I am not overly concerned with them, or I don't become focused on them. Because the fact is that our church is faithful and does faithful work. So I encourage you to face outward in your work. I'm not telling you to start a podcast to bless the saints in Brazil or Ecuador or France or wherever. I'm not telling you to use Moscow as a base to resist tyranny in California. What I'm saying is that let's be healthy parts of a healthy church, because our church has a disproportionate impact on the kingdom of Christ. And it's not just because of these luminaries that I talked about before. It's because of you and me. We're actually the ones that make it happen. Okay, I'm not saying that the luminaries are dispensable. They're not, right? Not as far as getting that message out, right? So people, for example, in my stories, they were keying off of Doug Wilson, but we're a part of the church that Doug Wilson pastors. The guys, with different podcasts and different stuff, we're a part of their audience. But more importantly than that is that we are a base. And by that I don't mean a customer base or an audience base. What I mean is that we are a platform from which to launch attacks. And if you've ever been on a military base, then you know that most of us are support staff. We're cooks, we're mechanics. Let's face out. The whole reason you're cooking spaghetti for 1,000 soldiers today is because they've got to go out. We've got to go out. Let's face out. We're going to produce more and more saints who will be changing the world more visibly for Christ than you and me. But it was us who made it happen. We were here, we were with our wives, we were faithful, we raised our kids. This is the second part of a two-part series. The first one was, should Christians move to Moscow? And, I said, yeah, if you can't, stay where you are, in summation. So when we're here, here I am in Brasilia making this, but yeah, when we're in Moscow, we ought to be thinking about the fact that we can make the lives of saints better. in other places, and better in concrete ways. Like both the examples from Brazil that I gave, like actual, like visible, immediate results in helping saints. You know, these stories I told about people being encouraged through the rest of the United States by the example that people like Gabe and Sean set, and with the whole community behind them, right? You know, that has real impact on real families. And we are a part of that. So, if you get to Moscow and you realize it's not pie in the sky, well, good. Buckle down, get to it, look out, and let's just do some kingdom work, which means that when I get back to Moscow, you can buy me a beer. Yeah. All right. The peace of Christ be upon you.
Aí sim é um homem de verdade, não é esses troços do grupo não, essas carcaças velhas, uol, fim de carreira.
Cadê você, profeta, autarquia? Hein? Pedrada no inferno, fala comigo aí, matador de demônio. Hein?